boredom, lack of contact with classmates, friends, and teachers, lack of personal space at home to play, and family financial loss can lead to some problematic and enduring effects on children and adolescents. Uh, Apart from normal children and developing some kinds of mental problems in this group of children, we will face some groups of high risk children who they have history of some mental illness, such as ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which is a common disorder in children and adolescents. They will have some symptoms including hyperactivity, impulsivity, attention deficit. So they need more supervision from the adults, such as teachers and parents. In this situation, they lose their educational supervision from their children. And so they will be less motivated in doing school works. And they need, these children need to have some physical activities during the day, and they need to go outdoor to do physical activities. And because of this restriction of outdoor physical activities, they will get bored at home and express more misbehavior, such as oppositionality, hyperactivity, aggression, and irritability. Since they should not go to school at the morning, they tend to go to sleep later and wake up later in the morning. And during the day, since they don't have alternative games and activities, they will spend more time on playing video games and watching TV. And in this situation, because of changing their routine, family routines, children and parents cannot follow the medication. And since the medication can improve their behaviors, in this situation, we will have exacerbation of the symptoms of ADHD. Apart from ADHD, we will have some children and adolescents with a history of autism spectrum disorder. In this disorder, children will have some problems in interacting with the others, and some problems in communication, verbal and nonverbal communication. They need to have some sorts of non-pharmacological treatment, such as speech therapy, occupational therapy, behavior therapy. And during the coronavirus pandemic, these facilities have been stopped, and they cannot get these treatments during the pandemic. So they may have some regression in their language, cognition, behavior, and emotion. In this situation, parents cannot tolerate and manage bad behavior and use physical punishment, and this leads to a vicious circle. And children with ASD or autism spectrum disorder, since they need to be at home during the day, they may get bored at home and express misbehavior. And the patterns of sleep and diet will also be changed. And children and parents, because of changing the family routine, they cannot follow the medication schedule. Therefore, they will have some increase in their symptoms, such as repetitive behavior, aggression, hyperactivity, and regression in language and communication. We also have some children with a history of anxiety disorder who are on medication and non-pharmacological treatment to reduce their anxiety. In this crisis, they will experience much more anxiety and fear of being infected and and they're worried about their parents being infected, and they will be hyper vigilant regarding the mortality and morbidity of COVID-19. Uh, Also, parents of these children may express more fear and anxiety uh, towards the infection, and this leads to more anxiety in children. And children and adolescents may feel helplessness, hopelessness, and some sorts of depression during this pandemic. And since the non-pharmacological treatment has been stopped, they will have some exacerbation of their symptoms. And if they do not follow the medication, we will have some increase in their symptoms. Some of these children may develop compulsive washing and cleaning during the coronavirus pandemic. We also have children of parents with COVID-19 infections. Parents of COVID-19 infection should be separated from their children. And these children may experience more psychological problems such as anxiety, irritability, misbehavior, and difficulty in falling to sleep, crying, clinging to the adults. And children of died parents will experience more mental health problems. And since they do not have the opportunity to have the grief walk and mourning, their mental problem will be increased, and they may have some pathological grief after this situation. It was found by some researchers that separation from parents also have during childhood also has long-term adverse effects on mental health in children and adolescents, such as developing mood disorders, psychosis, and suicidality in adulthood. With regards to education, we know that schools needed to be closed and education has stopped, and children do not have teacher supervision in their academic activities. So they may experience some regression in terms of academic achievement, especially in lower grade. And instead of children, instead of teachers, parents need to take the responsibility of teaching. So
ببین وقتی من میزنم صفحه سفیده.
So this may lead to academic underachievement because parents are not familiar with the education, with the learning strategy, with the teaching strategy. And it has been shown some months ago by Brasendel that prolonged school closure and home confinement during a disease outbreak might have negative effects on children's physical and mental health. And evidence suggests that when children are out of school, and they are physically less active, they spend more time watching TV and playing video game, and they will have irregular sleep patterns and less healthy diets. This situation will increase the weight of children, and they will face some physical problems, including cardiovascular problems. And these negative effects are worse when children are confined to their homes without contacting with their peer groups and without outdoor activity. In terms of parenting style, the parenting style will be changed during the outbreak. Parents need to be involved more with the children education, and this leads to more conflict with them. And parents may also experience more conflict with each other, which can cause low frustration tolerance and bad behaviors towards their children. And on the other hand, family may experience some economic problems, especially in low-income families, which causes more stress and irritability in parents, and this influence their parenting. And family doesn't have the opportunity to have leisure activity to relieve their experience stress. In this situation, children will be at higher risk of neglect and abuse. Now, what needs to be done? For general population of children, parents in this situation need to talk open with their children and explain the pandemic situation and its consequences based on the children understanding. And parents needs to respond to children reaction in a supportive way and give their children more attention. News and information about the mortality and infected people need to be limited for children. And parents need to keep their family routines such as sleep and diet. And family needs to be engaged more in indoor leisure activity consistent with the new situation. And parents needs to spend more time to play with their children, to give them more attention and to reassure them in this crisis. And children need to have some indoor supervised physical activities to prevent some physical problems. On the other hand, apart from the negative effects, home confinement could offer a good opportunity to enhance the interaction between parents and children and involve children in family activity and improve their self-sufficiency skills. With regards to high-risk groups, parents need to follow children treatment very well to prevent increasing misbehavior. And parents need to implement some sorts of therapy at home with the supervision of mental health team, such as some sorts of speech therapy or occupational therapy or behavior therapy. And on the other hand, psychologists and psychiatrists can provide online service for parents to cope with mental health issues caused by domestic conflicts and anxiety from being infected. And parents of high-risk group need to keep their routines in terms of sleeping and awakening time. And if possible, family can provide some limited outdoor activities. On the other hand, social agency need to be available to protect children against the abuse and neglect, and children should not be separated from their parents unless of being infected. If parents are infected and separated, children need to be in touch with them through the phone and media. And in this situation, other family members, such as father, siblings, or other family members need to take the responsibility of caring children. And with regards to the education of children, schools and teachers need to be involved in supervising through the media, and teacher need to get children involved in routine school work and ask them about doing school work and supervise them. On the other hand, the government should also provide guideline and principle of distance learning, and the materials of distance learning need to be age appropriate and attractive, and schools can offer the opportunity for students to interact with their children, with their classmates and teachers through the media. So this strategy can reduce the mental health problem during the COVID-19 pandemic. It can be concluded that we need to pay more attention to mental health problem of children and adults during COVID-19 pandemic. I hope we will be free of the coronavirus very soon. Thank you for your listening.
Many thanks, Dr. Cherhani-Doust. Many thanks, Dr. Cherhani-Doust. It's a really valuable lecture for us. No one didn't write any question in chat. I think we can connect to other speaker, Professor Dr. Brandt. Hello, Dr. Brandt.
Hello, everybody. Hello. Hello. Can you see me? Yes?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Okay.
We're looking forward to hear your valuable lecture, please.
Okay. Okay. I need, let me see, where are my slides? Must be this one. Okay. Do you see the slides? Okay. Excellent. So thank you very much, Professor Cherhani-Doust. From your point of view, as from a pediatric point of view, what I will do now is I will shift and go somehow from the other side. And I focus clearly not on children and adolescents, but I focus on adults and young and middle-aged or older adults. And I have a completely other claim. And the claim is that most probably, this situation we are is unique in our life because nobody else of us, I'm pretty sure, experienced such a lockdown. And most probably, this will be the only one in our life that we experience such a lockdown, that we have to stay at home, we have to care if we want it or not, we have to care for our children, for our families, and so on. I want to say that this lockdown is somehow a situation where we are forced to stay at home. Our everyday routines and activities are reduced. Above for social markers such as meeting friends or peers or colleagues or at work are reduced. And we have to cope with daily hassles at home, as also Professor Cherhani-Doust already underscored. It is also a kind of a situation where we have to cope with the uncertainty of the duration of this lockdown, or we have had to cope with this uncertainty, and also the intensity and also the content. So it means that somehow we are forced to focus on core concerns of our life, and we are somehow confined in a sort of self-reclusion. And as we can see on this picture on the right side, on the bottom, a crisis means always also a chance. So we are in front of bifurcation. The track goes either to the left or to the right. And I think it's up to us to find a way that this crisis is not a crisis, but rather a challenge. So it is also the possibility that everybody of us, and I'm talking about adults, I do not talk about children and adolescents, everybody of us, the adults, have the possibility somehow to review what am I doing now and what am I doing in my life, and who are we and how do we want to proceed in our life. So the core question is, how can I switch or flip this confinement, this lockdown, from a crisis into a challenge? We know from personality psychology that some people are particularly mentally tough. What is mental toughness? Mental toughness is a concept, a psychological concept, personality concept, which consists of 4 C's. So it is the commitment, challenge, control, and confidence. What are these labels? So control is the feeling that the majority of my life, I can modify, I can change, I can supervise, I can control. When I have this feeling of my own supervision and monitoring of my life, so I have a quite high feeling of control of my life. Confidence means that I have confidence not only in myself, in my skills, in my behavior, in my knowledge, but I also have a lot of confidence in my social environment. For example, children, but also wives and husbands, or peers, colleagues, friends, and so on. Challenge means that a change in my life, which above all is not controlled by myself, such as this pandemic, such as this lockdown. This is out of my control. Nevertheless, I can always take decisions and think, how should I behave? Is it rather a danger, or is it possible that I consider now this situation as a challenge, as a possibility to revise and supervise some of my behavior and eventually also to adapt? And commitment, the last or the first C, equals to attitude that I say to myself, I have some ideas how I want to monitor or create or form my life. I have goals, I have achievements, and I do stick to these achievements. We know from mental toughness research that above all, people who are highly committed to their own goals and aims, that they consider changes rather a challenge and not a danger, that they feel that they can control the larger part of their life, and that they have a high degree of self-confidence, but also confidence in others. Such people are more stable also during crisis. Again, this lockdown and this confinement is somehow a unique situation in our life, and it would be somehow really a pity if I did not learn anything for my life during this period. What I will show you now are some slides to instigate, to tease you, to think a bit more about what could be the core questions during this lockdown. What did I do so far in my life? What is important, and how to continue eventually my life. If I take this lockdown and my behavior and my skills and my knowledges, cognitions and emotions, I could also ask myself, what did change in my life during this lockdown? Second, what did I change? And here again, this concept of locus of control from Rotter. It's an old concept in psychology and personality psychology. Nevertheless, it works excellently. Then I can also ask which habits got even more intensive, or which habits lost their importance. We know that habits, routines are somehow plots to decrease the complexity of our everyday life, and routines have the advantage that I do not have to think too much about how to manage my everyday life. The routine is brushing teeth, taking a shower, eating, preparing tea, going to bed, routines, stuff like that. But nevertheless, we can also think if we have acquired some habits and some routines which perhaps also are dysfunctional. The next question, the fifth question is, which people did I miss a lot? We know that we are all social human beings, and basically we need and we love being in touch with other people. And during such a lockdown and such a confinement, I can also ask myself, which people are really very important to me and which people did I really miss a lot? I can also flip the other side and ask, which people didn't I miss? And why? Is it possible that I experience a sort of relief that these people are out of my current life? And then this also brings us to the question, what can I do to improve the quality of social interactions with people which are very important to me, and how can I decrease to a maximum the interaction with people who are, let's say in a colloquial style, who are rather sucking my energies. On a behavioral level, we can also ask, which activities did I miss a lot? Perhaps going out with my friends, or going to drink a tea with my parents, or with my children, or with my husband and spouse, or doing some sports activities, or watching a TV show whatsoever. And which activity did I reduce? And it was a pleasure to reduce them. So again, my idea is that we can also benefit from this lockdown to slow down our everyday life, that we can slow down our activities and to come to a halt and somehow to think, what did I do so far and how to continue, and are there elements I would like to delete. Here in this slide, we also have some further details. When I do ask myself, what did I change in my life during the lockdown? I can think about my habits and behavior, or above all, social interactions. In my opinion, this is particularly important to sort out, to be somehow a bit more brave, to say, okay, I would like to have more contact with my friend, with my colleague, with my football colleague. And I also want to eschew some people who only suck my energies, to say, okay, I don't need them anymore, or not that much anymore in my life. What did change in my emotions? Is it possible, as also Professor Tehrani Doust mentioned, is it also possible that being always at home with the whole family, that I get somehow more impulsive, that I have more difficulties to manage my unpleasant emotions, such as fear or anxiety or sadness, and also the cognitions in terms of what is healthy to me and what is rather bothering to me. I claim that this lockdown also gives me the huge advantage to think a bit more about my personality traits and behavior, which were perhaps particularly unpleasant. Did I detect some very dark sides of my behavior and personality? And if yes, how do I want to continue with these so-called dark traits? Do I want to continue with these traits? Do I want to even intensify these traits? It's actually not forbidden as long as I do not get criminal. Or do I want to find a way to decrease these so-called dark sides? As I stated in the third question, so if I have if in case I detected some dark, some unpleasant, some dysfunctional sides, how do I want to keep them dark, these dark sides, or do I want to modify them? Now we know that from behavioral psychotherapy and cognitive behavioral psychotherapy, we know that change is hard. Nevertheless, let's think about what we can do to improve functional behavior and to avoid or decrease dysfunctional behavior. First, we should accept that any change is hard. Second, the more the current situation is unpleasant, the more I feel the urge to change. As long as I'm living in a sort of comfort zone, I don't have to push to change anything. Third point, the more the goals and achievements are attractive, the more I feel the motivation to change my behavior. And ideally, I put the items number 2 and number 3 together to say, okay, if the current situation is particularly unpleasant and I want to change it, and if I know that in case I change, so the achievements are particularly catchy or fancy or sexy or whatsoever, then the odds are much higher that I really change my behavior, not only at short term, because now I am in the confinement and in the lockdown, but that I change my behavior a middle and long duration. Again, we know from cognitive psychological and cognitive behavioral therapy, psychotherapy, that there are some basic rules to improve change and to decrease dysfunctional change. 6 recommendations. First of all, think positive. Do not think what everything does not work, but think what you want to do. Think behavior. So what do I do really at the behavior level? Not only to think I could save the world. I have seen how James Bond is able to save the world in the last 7 seconds. But I would be able to, but really focus on behavior. Think future. What should change now and in future? Think small steps. Do not expect from yourself that you can change everything in your behavior, but focus on small changes. Then also think flexible, and above all also think solution. What should be the aim of this change and not what is always dysfunctional? So the question is, what are my important and recurrent topics in my life? What are my current concerns? So what are current concerns? We go back to Klinger 1981. Current concerns are topics, interests, themes in my life, which do repeatedly emerge during my everyday life. And from these current concerns, I can deduce what do I want to achieve or to be in my life. Again, we know from cognitive psychology that such current concerns, what is really important to me, what are my core needs, what are my core aspirations, what are my core visions, what are my core dreams, repeatedly and recurrently enter to the so-called stream of consciousness, which goes back to the founder of modern psychology, to William James. So the key point is the lockdown and the reduction of social and professional activities may help me to sort out much better what are really my core wishes, what are really my core concerns, what are really my core ideas, how to form and how to manage my life. Now some slides to help to get closer to important and recurrent topics. How to get curious about my own life. And one question might be that, imagine that the lockdown lasts for the next 6 months. And every month you can get rid from one problem. Now we have June, in 6 months it's December, so close to Yalda, close to Christmas. And imagine every month I can leave one problem behind me. Every month I can drop one problem. And then I can ask and figure out to myself which problems get smaller, or perhaps, unfortunately also, which problems might get even more difficult. To further come closer to our current concerns, to our topics, core topics, a further question might be, imagine that. Imagine that we meet again in June 2025, so in 5 years, or 2030, so in 10 years. What will you tell? What will you tell, and how did you change your life after the lockdown into 2020? How did you manage to improve your quality of life? And above all, again, at the level of social interactions, with whom are you still in touch, and which people did you sort out from your life? A further technique, a further intervention, also taken from the cognitive behavioral therapy, is the question of imagine that. Imagine that a magician or a fairy turns back the time to February 1st, 2020. So imagine that these two fairy persons are able to go back in time, and imagine that you could restart the lockdown once again. Perhaps for some people now this is completely scaring, okay, I can imagine, but again, take it as a mental, flexible exercise. Which behavior would you improve, and which behavior would you decrease? And again, which people would you meet and talk more, and which people would you rather sort out? You can also go back with this question to a more concrete level, and to think, so if the lockdown started again from February 1st, and I have 3 months in front of me to stay at home, what would I change? For example, what would I change in my apartment? What would I change in my diet? Professor Tehrani Doust did precisely mention that there is a risk that the longer we are at home, the less we are physically active, the more we have 24-hour access to the refrigerator. There is also the risk that we gain weight. So again, how would I change my apartment? What would I change in my diet? How would I adapt my physical activity level? How would I adapt my social contacts? A further technique is to imagine. To write a book about your life before and after the lockdown. As we see these two ladies in a park, sitting in the green, having books and notebooks and computers. What might be the title of your book? And which chapters would you write? And for example, if you really wish to challenge what did change during this lockdown, you can even start this evening to write the abstract or the cover of your book. And above all, always think about the happy end. You can even start the book with a happy end, because remember, if you come to an end and this end is poor and unhappy, so you are still not at the end. The end is a happy end. You can also take a notebook, and you can also think about the title, or here I propose the title. And the title of this book is Everything I Need to Know in My Life I Learned from the Lockdown and COVID-19. Imagine you would also sort out, put together what are the lessons learned during all these months and weeks being at home and being somehow reduced and thrown to my own core activities and to my own core needs. So the take-home messages are the following. Most probably, for the majority of us, the lockdown and reclusion due to COVID-19 pandemic is a unique event in our life. The lockdown gives us, or has given us, the possibility to come to a halt and to stop in our life. And such a stop, such a timeout gives us also the excellent opportunity to review our current life. What and who is important, what and who can I sort out, which habits do I wish to kill, and which new skills or habits do I wish to improve, and what will change in my life after the lockdown. As a final comment, also in Europe and also in Basel, for example, the traffic, but also the traffic with the airplanes was reduced to zero. And I've never ever seen our river, the River Rhine, as blue as we could enjoy it in these weeks. Likewise, I never ever have seen such a blue sky during my life here in Basel, most probably also because aircrafts were reduced to practically zero. Thank you very much for your attention and all the best.
Thank you very much, Professor Brand. The third part of our program is the COVID-19 pandemic and healthcare providers. What does it mean psychologically? By Dr. Mohammed Arbabi, Associate Professor of Psychiatry from Tehran University. Good afternoon again, Professor Arbabi, and many thanks for your valuable cooperation. We look forward to hearing your helpful lecture.
Thank you so much. I want to share my screen. I'm not sure, do you my slide?
We can see it. You can click on a slideshow. Yes, it's great.
Is it okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
Everybody, thank you so much for Dr. Turhanidous and Dr. Brands for designing and preparing this. I am Dr. Mohammed Arbabi as an academic staff in Tehran University of Medical Sciences, and I would like to talk about COVID-19 pandemic and healthcare providers' psychological issues. In this talk, I'm going to talk about the COVID-19 pandemic characteristics, and I would like to explain the psychological effects of this pandemic on healthcare provider, and finally, I will mention mental health promotion intervention that could be useful for this time. There is a question: is there any similarity between COVID-19 pandemic and other kinds of pandemics like MERS or SARS or any natural disaster? It seems that there are some different issues are related to COVID-19 pandemics. Look at on this figure, you can see here there are lots of places in the world, from the far west to the far east, that are affected by this virus. I take this picture today morning from Google News, and it shows that this is a worldwide outbreak. As you know, in the first 2 months, we have a rapid spread of the infection in the world, and all of the countries are affected by these infections through the first months. And there are new issues in this pandemics that, although there's an epidemic in the societies and some people are volunteer to help other people, but the rate of the volunteers are not too much like other natural disaster or pandemics, because there is a risk of mortality or infections by other people in this pandemic. These issues show that the COVID-19 pandemic is an unprecedented event, that we don't have any similar experience so far. Regarding these characteristics, we are concerned about the psychological issues for healthcare provider. As you know, the first responders to any disease are healthcare providers. In pandemics like COVID-19 and SARS, we have lots of risks to taking fatal diseases like infectious or morbidity that comes from this kind of pandemics. And as you know, because of a rapid spread of the virus, the resources are too much limited for protecting the healthcare providers. These issues prone healthcare providers to some psychological stress and overworked situations. There is a study in Iran that we have done in Imam Khomeini Hospital in Tehran University, that healthcare providers mentioned that uncertainty about the situation and crisis in management of the situation were the major sources of the stress in this situation. Regarding this issue, we need to review the evidence that published so far. There is a study in Wuhan, in China, in February 2020, among 5,062 medical staff, that they reported level of stress, depression, and anxiety was about 219%, 13.5%, and 24.1% respectively in medical staff. And in this sample, female gender, long working experience, underlying chronic diseases, and a history of psychiatric disorder in themselves or their family were the risk factor to experience psychiatric symptoms. And these subjects mentioned that if they have a good support of hospital officials and availability of the complete protective equipment were as a protective factors against the psychological stress in this period of time. In another study in China, in 34 hospitals, they surveyed psychological distress among medical staff, and they reported that 15.4% experienced depressive symptoms, 40.6% had anxiety symptoms, and 34 reported insomnia. And in this sample, nurses, women, frontline medical staff had more severe symptoms, that these groups were more vulnerable to psychiatric suffering and symptoms. What was about the Iran? We have done a study in Imam Khomeini Hospital, which is the biggest general hospital in the Iran, in staff who worked in COVID-19 departments, and we found that among 306 healthcare workers, they reported about 29% moderate to severe symptoms of anxiety, and about 16% depressive symptoms. Both rates are higher than the general population in Iran. And it means that the rate of anxiety and depressive symptoms are more prevalent in healthcare workers, in medical staff, and medical staffs in COVID-19 departments. And females and nurses are more prone to experience these symptoms. In this study, medical staff reported that providing adequate protective equipment such as gloves, masks, and others, and appreciated by other people and healthcare services, protect them against the psychological side effects of the COVID-19 pandemics. What was about the long-term effect of the COVID-19 and psychological consequences? Actually, there is not any evidences about the long-term effects, because we have no report about the long-term effect. At the moment, we are within the pandemics, but we can refer to past experiences in MERS and SARS pandemics. Evidence shows that about 2 years after MERS and SARS pandemics, healthcare workers in hospitals have symptoms of chronic stress, occupational burnout, depression symptoms, and increasing smoking and alcohol consumption are the major psychiatric problems in this staff reported. And one of the interesting findings was that depression or major depressive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and other mental disorder have not increased. Although the rate of psychiatric symptoms like depression, depressive symptoms, and anxiety symptoms were increased, but the rate of depressive disorder, like major depressive disorder, PTSD, and other mental disorder were not increased. It means that subsyndromal symptoms may increase following this kind of pandemics. But the rate of major psychiatric symptoms may not increase. Regarding this issue, it's important that we change our intervention, and we need to apply adaptation and resilience models instead of clinical intervention, like cognitive behavioral psychotherapy for each person, or prescribing medication for them. And studies shows that long-term stress following the pandemics are related to self-blamed cognitive style and using avoidance strategies. So if we could change this kind of adaptation and coping strategies, we may decrease the chronic stress following these pandemics. what can we do for mental health promotion in medical staff? There is one approach for individual and one approach for organizational. It means that we cannot provide a mental health promotion without organizational interventions. We need both of them together to promote mental health. In individual mental health promotion, we have two parts. One is improving the resilience, and the second one is promoting psychological first aids. What does it mean? I would like to tell about psychological first aid at first, and second, I explain more about the resilience. In psychological first aid, as any medical situation that we use first aid to save and promote health of the injured people, in psychological first aid, there are some techniques that improve psychological health of injured people. There is 3 steps simply that we can use in psychological first aid. The first step is look to ourselves and others around us. Secondly, listen to our monologue and people who injured psychologically. And finally, link to each other to improve our connection and link and support each other in a crisis situation. There are 4 steps in other view in psychological first aid that we can create calmness within ourselves and other people by using calm and reassuring language, creating sense of safety, and creating self and collective efficacy by better communication and talking with each other and creating connection. These 4 components can increase hope to solve the problem, and it could be a very effective way to cope with the crisis and psychological effects of pandemics. In the second part, we can be familiar with resilience and improve our competency in resilience. What does it mean? What is the meaning of the resilience? Resilience is a rebound to normal or more than normal than previous after a trauma, a psychological trauma. We can rebound ourselves and our competency to cope with the situation, and sometimes better than previous. You can see this figure that presented by Fischer-Bacher. When we have a trauma, we can have different types of outcome. When we collapse after a trauma, because we don't have any resilience opportunity and competency, and it's continue to the worst outcome. Sometimes we can recover, but we cannot get the previous situation than after the trauma. It means the recovery, but sometimes we can bounce back to the normal, and we can get our normal situation. That it means recover. But the optimum outcome is build back better than previous, better than situation before the trauma. It means adaptation that is the best outcome. I confess that I am impressed by Yerkes and Dodson principle that is one of the most famous study in the psychology more than 100 years. They showed that when we are encountering with the stress, our performance increase after dealing with the stress because of increasing the attention and interest up to the optimal arousal, we can get the optimal performance. But after this point, by increasing the stress and arousal, our function and performance impaired because of a strong anxiety. It means that to somehow anxiety and stress can improve our performance. I would like to refer to Professor Brand talk, who mentioned that this situation, pandemic of COVID-19, can improve our life, can learn us some new tips and new lessons. I would like to explain more. You can notice here a diagram. At the usual situation, we are at the comfort zone without any stress, and we live or routine daily activities, but with some experience of stress or performance can improve and increase to optimal zone. But when the stress is too much, our function will decrease and we will enter to the danger zone. It's an optimal outcome is we are going to reach this optimal performance zone by controlling our stress and using some techniques to improve our performance. How can we do it? Please see on this diagram that I take it from Catherine Pereira lectures that I think is a good diagram for these days. It means that who do I want to be during COVID-19? Based on the past diagram, as a usual reaction to the COVID-19 situation, we experience some stress. It means that we can going to be enter to fear zone with high stress, high anxiety, high fear. In this situation, we can do some behavior that increase our fear, like I grab food, toilet paper, and medication that I don't need because I scared of the COVID-19 consequences. I complain frequently about the bad situation that I experienced. I forward all of messages I receive, especially negative messages. And sometimes I tell myself I get mad easily. This kind of behavior increase our fear and put ourselves to the danger zone. But we can control this situation by a technique that is de-escalating. We can de-escalate our negative emotion to decrease the effect of stress on our mental health. But we can control the fear zone by de-escalating, and we can move to the a higher level of mental health by problem-solving technique. By problem-solving technique, we can try to do some new approaches in pandemic to improve our mental health. By problem solving, we can reach to learning zone. How can we do it? By start up to give up what I can control. I stop compulsively consuming what hurts me, from food to news. I identify my emotion and control them. I evaluated information before spreading something false, and I recognize that we are all trying to do our the best. All of these things are related to problem solving. By using problem solving and approaching to new solution for this problem, we can move to learning zone. But we can continue our growth to next step by using empathy technique. By empathize ourselves or other people, we can continue to grow and improve our mental health even better than previous, even before the COVID-19 pandemics. How can we do it? We can think of the others and see how to help them. I make my talents available to those who need them. I live in the present and focus on the future. I am empathetic with myself and with others. I look for a way to adapt to new changes, and I practice patience, relationship, and creativity. So, with these three techniques, de-escalating, problem solving, and empathy, we can control our anxiety and improve our mental health, and even catch new skills in our life that could be as a great treasure in our life. Other than individual intervention, there are some organizational intervention that should be done for improving the healthcare provider mental health, such as considering measures for full coverage of frontier departments, providing psychosocial response teams and psychological hotline teams, and applying leadership strategies such as backup plans, flexibility, personal adaptation. Finally, I would like to review my talk in take-home message. As I mentioned, evidence show that there are increase in depression and anxiety symptoms, but it does not mean depressive disorder, PTSD, and other mental disorder have increased. Regarding these subsyndromal symptoms, the most needed interventions are using psychological first aid and improving resilience. I would like to mention this photo at the end of my talk, who is an Iranian nurse in a hospital in a shift, and she was dancing. Maybe she used this method to improve herself, mental health, and there are lots of techniques that people can use individually based on their mental health characteristic to improve their mental health during these kind of pandemics. Thank you so much for your attention.
Many thanks to Dr. Arbabi for your useful presentation, and also thanks again to Professor Tehrani Doust and Professor Brand. At the end of this program, we want to say the final point to all of our speakers. Please say the final point to our participants. Dr. Tehrani Doust, please
Thank you very much for our colleague, Professor Brand from Switzerland, and Dr. Arbabi, who touched the main points of psychological problems during COVID-19. Really, I should mention that during this crisis, we will have, apart from some physical problems induced by the coronavirus, we will face some psychological problems. Problems which are induced from some sorts of psychosocial environment, such as lockdown and restriction, limitation of activities, economic problems, and these psychological and this environmental stressor can increase and can influence mental health problem, especially from my point of view, in children and adolescents, and we need to pay more attention to their problems and intervene and have some intervention for reducing these problems, because the stressor and the crisis appears to be long, and we will have a long-standing crisis, and we need to reduce the psychological consequences. Thank you again.
And thank you, Dr. Terhanidous. One of the our participants, I think this Dr. Meysam Sharifzadeh, wants to say to you, thank you very much to dear professor, especially from their Professor Tehranidous, who, although I was not in their service during medical student, I was proud to be his student in high school, and that's it. I think it's one of our students. And Professor Brandt, do you have any final points?
I just want to underline that I was very happy to be invited to this online webinar. It was a great honor to meeting you in person, but also to meeting you, to meeting my colleagues, you virtually. And I highly appreciated the contributions and the slides of my two other colleagues. They gave me a further drive to look at this pandemia and to also focus on some specific issues. Actually, I never thought about the issue of children with ASD, for example, that when they are not allowed to go to school, how to cope with such children, or children with ADHD, having such children at home for 24 hours. This must be really the ultimate challenge. If you survive as a parent 3 months with a child at home with ADHD, then you will survive everything. Yeah. And of course, thank you also to Professor Arbadi to giving us a further touch of how to cope with this situation, and to see also that there are also benefits at long term, even if the situation at now is challenging and difficult and stressing, of course, but to see also that at middle and long term, we can also benefit from this unique experience. Again, thank you so much to my colleagues. And of course, thank you so much, Gilda. I call you Gilda, for the organization. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. You're welcome. And Dr. Meysam Sharifzadeh, write to you and say many thanks about show a different nice and beautiful kind of a view about COVID-19. And also Dr. Marzieh Hassanpour write about many very thanks very much to all of the speaker, and very interesting, and she very likes puzzle, I think. And Professor Arbabi, do you have any final point about this event?
It's a great pleasure to join Dr. Terhani Dus and Dr. Brands, and I have learned a very nice points for both presentation. And thank you so much, Gilda, for your organization. I have a comment and question about my talk and Professor Brand talk. Professor Brand present the mental toughness or mental cognitive toughness issue. That means resistance about the difficult situation and crisis. But there is another subject is resilience. What's your idea, Professor Brands, about the difference between toughness and resilience? As I understood, resilience means a type of flexibility. Is it same with toughness or not? Would you please explain about the toughness and difference between toughness and resilience?
Okay, thank you. So I see that you have further 3 hours this evening.
Yeah.
No, very basically, resilience comes from the research in psychological research in the 80s. So the Mahdi and Kobassa. Mahdi is Jewish, and he survived the concentration camps from the Nazis. Then he moved to the US, and he thought, and he was thinking, why could I cope such a inhuman situation, being in a concentration camp? Why did I survive and I feel nice? And how come other people cracked? So this from Mahdi comes this idea from resilience. To my knowledge, he created just this model. And I mean, it's not to criticize, but he never ever proved and tested his theory. It is as Maslow, you know, the pyramid of Maslow. It is nice, but Maslow never ever proved if this really is testable. And say likewise, the concept of resilience from Mahdi is nice. It is plausible. I can follow, I can understand, but it has never been tested as it was tested from the concept of mental toughness. Mental toughness derives from sports psychology. People asked, how come Roger Federer is able to play at his age at the highest level? How come, let me think, sadly, I do not know Iranian sportsmen, but I know that there are teams, there's Esteglal.
Halidai.
Yes, exactly. They play excellently at the highest level. And also the Iranian national football team went to the World Cup, or also female volleyball players. They must be very tough. Otherwise, you do not achieve the level to achieve to a national team. So the concept of mental toughness was basically also data-driven. And this is the huge advantage from the concept created by Peter Klaus. He's now in Manchester, and Peter Klaus, and he created this concept above all, he tested these concepts. And he added above all the commitment, the point of commitment. How come somebody is able to stay focused and stable for several years? And his idea was that exactly is the point of commitment. I have an idea, I have a dream, I have a vision. I want to become psychologist, I want to become psychotherapist, I want to get a professorship, I want to play well as tennis as Nadal. And then I focus and I stay focused, even if the everyday life is very unpleasant. You know exactly how much time you had to invest to get your professorship, how much time you had to skip from your family, from leisure time, from sports, to focus on your cognitive skills. And so the answer was, if people who stay committed to their ideas, to their visions, to their dreams, they cope much better with everyday issues. What we did, Marcus Gerber and I, what we did is we transferred this concept of mental toughness from sports psychology to everyday life. And we could also see that people, also normal workers with a high mental toughness, or nurses with high mental toughness, psychologists or medical doctors with a high degree of mental toughness, they cope much better with everyday hazards also at work compared to those with lower mental toughness.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now the next three hours we do it together without the group.
Try on mental toughness. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. Many thanks again from our dearest speaker. And at the end of this program, I want to say this program is developed by Tehran University of Medical Science in collaboration with the Leading House for Iran and Switzerland Academic Parents Partnership and Iranian Child and Adolescent Psychiatric Association, Basel University Psychiatric Clinic, Department of Psychiatry, Ruzbe Hospital, Universal Scientific Education and Research Network, and Coronavirus Cambium. I would like to express my special thanks to all of our committee organization member, Ms. Sepite Javdanfar, expert for international relations at the Leading House for Iran-Switzerland Academic Partnership, and Ms. Masume Abdullahi, Master of Science of Medical Information Technology Engineering, Senior IT Assistant of International Relations, Tehran University of Medical Science, and also Mr. Ali Sayadi, Chief Officer Director of International Relations of TOMS. And we want to take a memorial photo, and I invite all of our dear participants and the speaker to start their video camera and be present in our memorial photo. Please open all of your camera. Ms. Abdullah Zadeh, are you ready for taking a picture? Thank you very much. We don't have Dr. Wandeli, Schilling, and some of our other participants. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much. And many thanks for your kind participation, and hope to see you at our next COVID-19 and mental health web symposium. Bye.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Goodbye. Thank you so much. Goodbye. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye bye. Many thanks.